tracks ended at my feet. Not gradually, not scattered by wind or softened by fresh powder. They stopped. Clean edges, defined treads, precise spacing, and then nothing. As if whatever had been walking toward me across 300 meters of open snowfield had simply ceased to exist the moment it reached the place where I was standing. I hadn't moved in 40 minutes. I'd come out to check the temperature sensor on the north perimeter post, same as every morning. My own prints trailed behind me back toward the station. One set going one direction. These came from the opposite way, from the tree line to the northwest, where the black spruce thickened and the terrain dropped toward a frozen tributary I hadn't visited in days. 2 sets of tracks, converging on the same point. Mine, and something else's. I crouched. The cold bit through my gloves as I pressed my hand into the snow beside one of the prints. The tread pattern was deep, symmetrical, vibram sole, lug pattern consistent with a mountaineering boot. I looked at the bottom of my own boot. Same pattern, not similar, not close, identical. Same depth, same weight distribution, same slight lateral drag on the left heel that I developed after tweaking my knee on a river crossing 2 seasons ago. I stood up too fast. My vision swam, and when it cleared, the snowfield was exactly as empty as it had been. No movement, no sound except the low, constant push of wind through the spruce. The prints went back toward the trees in a straight, purposeful line. No wandering, no pauses. Whatever made them had walked directly to where I was standing and stopped. Or it was still here, standing where I was standing. I turned around slowly. The station was 200 meters behind me. A squat, dark green rectangle against the snow. Antenna mast, visible above the roofline. Smoke drifted from the stovepipe. Everything looked normal. I looked down at the tracks again. Counted them. 46 steps from the tree line to my position. Consistent stride length. Roughly 80 centimeters. I measured my own stride on the way back. 81 centimeters. Close enough to be the same person on slightly different terrain. That's when everything changed. I followed the tracks backward. It took 20 minutes to reach the tree line, stepping beside the prints, not in them. I told myself it was preservation instinct. Don't contaminate the evidence, but the truth was simpler. I didn't want my feet in those tracks. Inside the tree cover, the prints continued. The stride shortened slightly on the uneven ground, exactly as mine would. The boot caught on a buried root in one spot and left a scuff mark. Natural, unremarkable. The gait of a man who knew how to walk in deep winter terrain. They went on for over a kilometer. Then they started. Not from a snowmobile track, not from a road or a clearing. They began in a small gap between 2 spruce trees, in snow that was otherwise undisturbed for 50 meters in every direction. First print, right foot, full weight, as if someone had been set down from above. No landing impact, no compression circle, just a standing start from nothing. I stayed at that spot for a long time. The snow around it was smooth and unbroken, with that particular blue-white quality it gets when it hasn't been touched in days. The wind hadn't filled the tracks, which meant they were fresh. Hours, not days. Made during the night, while I was asleep. I keyed the radio when I got back to the station. My hands were steady. I wasn't frightened yet. I was in that narrow corridor between confusion and the thing that comes after it. Mitch, you copy? Static. Then the familiar click. Yeah, copy. What's up? Anything unusual on your end last night? Movement on the cams, wildlife alerts, anything? A pause. Mitch's station was 40 kilometers southeast, close enough for radio contact, far enough to be useless in an emergency. We checked in twice a day, at noon and 6 p.m. That was the routine. Negative. Quiet night. Hey, you feeling all right? You sounded a little off this morning. I stopped. This morning? Yeah, the 6 o'clock. You called in early, wanted to know about weather conditions to the northwest. I told you the front stalled over Cluane, probably won't push through until Thursday. I hadn't made a 6 o'clock call. I was asleep at 6 o'clock. I'd woken at 7:15, same as every morning, to the alarm I set on my watch, because the clock in the station ran 4 minutes fast, and I'd stopped trusting it in November. Mitch, I didn't call you at 6. Another pause. Longer this time. Man, it was you. Same frequency, same voice. You asked about the northwest corridor specifically. Wanted to know if I'd seen any movement on the Donjek side. I was asleep. Then who the hell did I talk to for 4 minutes? I didn't answer. I crossed the station to the radio desk and checked the transmit log. The equipment was old but functional. A Coden HF unit with a basic usage counter that logged transmission times. 6:02, 4-minute transmit window. Exactly as Mitch described. Someone had used my radio at 6 in the morning while I was sleeping 12 feet away. I checked the station door. The bolt was in the locked position, same as I'd left it. The windows were sealed. Standard procedure below -30. The wood stove had burned down to coals, meaning no one had fed it since I'd loaded it at midnight. Everything locked. Everything sealed. And someone had walked in, used my radio, and walked out without waking me. I went outside again, looked at the snow around the station with different eyes. My prints, door to privy, door to woodpile, door to the instrument shed, normal morning patterns. Then I found the third set, same boots, same stride, starting from the station door, going northwest into the trees, the direction the tracks came from. I hadn't made those prints. I knew every step I'd taken that morning, and none of them went northwest. But there they were, my boots, my gait, my weight, walking out of my station and into the forest toward the exact point where the impossible tracks began from nothing. I went back inside and locked the door, sat at the desk, and tried to think clearly. The rational explanations ran out fast. No one within 100 kilometers could reach the station on foot. The nearest road was the Alaska Highway, 60 clicks south. No aircraft, I would have heard it, and the snow showed no rotor wash, no snowmobile tracks, no ski trails. Someone wearing my exact boots had walked out of the wilderness, entered my locked station, used my radio to call my colleague, asked specific questions about terrain to the northwest, and walked back out. And their tracks ended at the exact spot where I'd been standing an hour later. That's when I checked the boots. I had 2 pairs. The ones I was wearing and a backup stored on the drying rack by the stove. I pulled the backup pair down and examined the soles. Wet. Not damp from proximity to heat. Wet. The lug pattern was packed with fresh snow that hadn't fully melted. The interior lining was cold, as if the boots had been outside recently and returned. I held them beside the prints outside the door, identical match to the third set. The set I didn't make. Someone had worn my backup boots during the night, walked to the tree line and back, made a radio call and returned them to the rack. Or I'd done it. I sat with that for a while. Sleepwalking was possible. I'd never done it before, not once in 34 years. but isolation does things. I'd read the literature during training. Disrupted circadian rhythms, cumulative sleep deprivation, the psychology of single-operator winter postings. It was in the manual, Section 7, Psychological Readiness. But sleepwalkers don't lace boots properly. They don't operate an HF radio on the correct frequency with coherent speech. They don't ask tactical questions about weather corridors and terrain features. And they don't walk a kilometer into the forest in a perfectly straight line and walk back. I radioed Mitch at noon. Standard check-in. Kept my voice flat. The 6 o'clock call. What exactly did I say? He thought about it. You asked about Donjet conditions. Whether there'd been any movement. I assumed you meant caribou. Then you asked about ridgeline visibility between your position and the northwest approach, whether the weather would clear enough to see the high ground. Did I sound normal? You sounded like you, maybe a little measured, like you were reading from something. Reading from something. Like you were choosing words carefully, but it was your voice, man. 100%. I thanked him and signed off. Then I pulled my backup boots on, grabbed the rifle, and walked northwest. Not because I'd decided it was safe, because the weight of the rifle in my hands was the only thing that felt like mine. The tracks led through the same kilometer of spruce, past the starting point where they began from nothing and beyond. No trail, no cut line, just dense boreal forest, snow piled heavy on the branches, the light going gray-blue even at midday. I walked another hour. The tracks continued, same stride, same precision. No stops, no detours. Whoever walked this line knew exactly where they were going. Then the smell hit me. Faint. Organic. Warm in a way that nothing should be warm out here, like breath but thicker, like the inside of a mouth. The tracks turned east and descended into a shallow depression where the spruce gave way to a cluster of birch skeletons. The light flattened. That kind of winter light that kills depth perception, makes the ground and air look like the same substance. That's where I found the hollow, a space under the root system of a massive fallen spruce, sheltered from wind, carpeted with something dark. The tracks led directly to it, and beside the entrance, in a space cleared of snow with deliberate care, there was a shape I recognized. My jacket, the one I'd reported damaged in October, the one I'd stuffed in the burn barrel because the zipper had failed and headquarters wouldn't ship a replacement until spring. It was folded neatly, placed on a square of birch bark, dry and warm. I touched it before I could stop myself. Not residual warmth, active warmth. The fabric held heat as if someone had just taken it off seconds ago. I stepped back, looked into the hollow. Dark inside, darker than midday allowed. A blackness that looked deliberate, chosen. The smell was stronger here, wet and biological, like soil that had never frozen. Something was breathing in there, slow, measured, not animal, but the rhythm was too regular, too controlled. Human cadence, human lung capacity. I raised the rifle. The breathing stopped, not tapered off, not held. It stopped the way a recording stops, when someone presses pause, mid-exhale with a click of the throat that I felt in my own chest. Silence. Total. No wind, no birds, no creak of cold wood. Manufactured silence, as if the forest had been switched off. I stood for 60 seconds with the rifle aimed at the dark. My finger was outside the trigger guard because my training was stronger than my fear, and you don't put your finger on the trigger until you've identified the target. I never identified it. Because when I backed away, one careful step at a time, and looked down at the snow in front of the hollow, I saw what I'd missed on the way in. 2 sets of tracks going into the den. 1 set coming out. The ones coming out were mine. The ones I was standing in. The ones I'd just made walking here. The ones going in were also mine. Same boots, same stride, same drag on the left heel. Whoever had walked to my station during the night had come from here and come back here, and they were still inside. I backed away until the hollow was out of sight. Then I turned and walked fast, rifle across my chest, checking behind me every 30 seconds. The forest was silent the entire way back. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses against your eardrums and makes you aware of your own pulse. By the time I reached the station, the sun had dropped behind the ridge line, and the temperature was falling fast. I bolted the door, fed the stove, and sat with the rifle across my knees, watching the window that faced northwest. At 1800, I did the standard check-in with Mitch. He sounded normal. I sounded normal. We talked about weather. I didn't mention the tracks or the hollow or the jacket or the breathing. At 2200, I killed the lantern and lay on the cot with the rifle beside me. I didn't sleep. I watched the door and I listened. At 2:14, I heard footsteps outside, my boots, my stride, walking from the tree line toward the station in a straight, unhurried line, getting closer. They stopped at the door. And then, very softly, from the other side of the wood, in my voice, in my exact cadence, with the particular way I drop the ends of sentences when I'm tired, I heard myself say, "Mitch, you copy?" I didn't move. The voice was mine, not an approximation, not a recording, played back with distortion. Mine. The same throat, the same breath control, the same half-swallowed consonants I'd developed from years of keying radios in cold air. It came through the door as naturally as if I were standing on the other side talking to myself. "Mitch, you copy? Checking northwest conditions. Over." Silence. Then again, patient, unhurried. "Mitch, Station 2, you copy?" It was waiting for the radio to answer, but the radio was inside. With me. 10 feet from my cot, unit powered down, the transmit light dark. Whatever was standing outside my door was speaking into nothing, rehearsing the words or expecting the signal to carry through wood and air by sheer repetition. I pressed my back against the wall beside the window and tilted my head until I could see through the gap, where the frost had peeled the sealant from the frame. Moonlight on snow. The perimeter was bright enough to read by. I saw the tracks first. Fresh ones, still sharp-edged, coming from the northwest tree line in that same straight path. They ended at the door. I shifted my angle. Nothing there. The space in front of the door was empty, bare snow, no figure, no shadow, no indication that anything solid had made those prints. But the voice continued, steady calm, standing in air that held no body. "Copy, Mitch. Conditions at Station 1 nominal. Requesting update on Donjek corridor. Over." It was using my call patterns, the specific phrasing I used during check-ins. Not generic radio protocol in my protocol. The way I always said nominal instead of good, because old habits from my previous posting in Inuvik had never fully died. The voice stopped mid-sentence. Not a fade. A cut. Like someone had pressed a finger to its lips. Then footsteps. Walking away from the door, my stride, my pace. Unhurried, deliberate. Crunching through the frozen crust, with exactly the weight I carried. I counted the steps until they faded. 43. Heading northwest. I didn't sleep. I sat against the wall with the rifle across my thighs. and watched the window until the sky turned from black to gray, to that thin, pale yellow that passes for dawn in the Yukon in January. By the time I could see the tree line clearly, my hands were stiff, and my neck had locked into a permanent tilt from pressing my ear to the wall. I opened the door at first light with the rifle shouldered. The tracks were there. A full set, coming and going, same boots, same stride. But this time there was something new. It had circled the station, a complete loop, starting from the northwest approach, walking to the door, then continuing around the east wall, past the instrument shed, around the south side, where the woodpile blocked easy passage. The tracks went over the woodpile, straight across the stacked rounds without disturbing a single log, along the west wall past the privy and back to the front door. A perfect perimeter circuit, as if it were measuring the building, counting the windows, learning the layout. I checked every window. The frost patterns were intact on all of them except one. The instrument shed window. The latch was a simple hook and eye, and the eye had been bent slightly outward. Not broken, adjusted. Widened just enough that the hook would slip free if you pushed the frame from outside with steady, even pressure. I checked the shed. My instruments were undisturbed. The weather logger, the backup batteries, the satellite phone I kept for emergencies, everything in its place, except the toolbox. It had been moved. Not far, maybe 6 inches to the left. I knew because I kept it flush with the wall beside the battery rack, and now there was a gap. Inside, everything was present. Pliers, wire cutters, electrical tape, the small hatchet I used for kindling. But the hatchet was facing the wrong way. Blade left instead of blade right. I always stored it blade right because I'm right-handed and I grab it by the handle without looking. Someone had taken it out, used it or held it, and put it back with the wrong orientation. Such a small thing. The kind of detail you'd miss if you weren't the person who'd placed it there 100 times. That's when I understood something important. Whatever was doing this wasn't being careless. It was being almost perfect. And the gap between almost perfect and perfect was the only reason I knew it had been here at all. I radioed Mitch at 8 o'clock, 2 hours early. He picked up on the second call. "You're early. I need you to tell me something yesterday. Keep the 6 o'clock call. Did I say anything personal? Anything that wasn't operational?" Mitch was quiet for a moment. I could hear him shifting in his chair, that particular creak his station furniture made. "You asked about the supply run, whether the contractor had confirmed the Thursday window?" "That was operational. That was fine." "Anything else?" "You asked how my knee was doing." I felt the cold move from my hands into my chest. "I've never asked about your knee, Mitch." "Sure you have. Last week. I told you about slipping on the ice by the fuel cache. You asked about it again yesterday, whether the swelling had gone down. It was, I don't know, it was nice. You're not usually the type to follow up on stuff like that." He was right, I wasn't. I cataloged injuries as operational data. Can Mitch walk? Can Mitch work? Does Mitch need evac? I didn't ask about swelling. I didn't do follow-up concern. It wasn't coldness. It was just how I was built. But the thing wearing my voice did. It had taken the framework of how I spoke and improved it. Made it warmer, more human. It was editing me. "Mitch, listen carefully. If I call you outside of scheduled check-ins, noon and 6 p.m., I need you to ask me something only I would know, something from before this posting." "What are you talking about?" "Just do it. Pick something. A question with a specific answer." He paused. Okay, where did we eat the night before deployment? The restaurant in Whitehorse. Klondike rib and salmon. You ordered the halibut and complained it was dry, and I told you everything north of the 60th parallel is dry, including the conversation. He laughed, but it was nervous. Yeah. Okay, that's you. What the hell is going on up there? I don't know yet. Just, use the question every time. If I can't answer it, it's not me. I signed off before he could push further. I wasn't ready to explain what I didn't understand. Saying it out loud would make it real in a way I wasn't prepared for, and right now, the only advantage I had was that I was thinking clearly. Fear was there, but it was below the surface, a deep current, not a wave. I could work above it as long as I didn't look down. I spent the next 2 hours preparing. I strung a line of copper wire across the northwest approach, 18 inches above the snow, connected to 3 tin cans filled with gravel inside the station. Tripwire, crude but functional. Anything walking the standard path from the tree line to the door would hit it. I marked the inside of every window latch with a small dot of red paint from the instrument maintenance kit. If anything opened a window, the paint would smear or transfer. I took the backup boots and locked them in the equipment trunk, padlocked it, put the key on the cord around my neck. Then I pulled on my coat, chambered around, and went back to the hollow. I moved differently this time. I circled wide, approaching from the south instead of following the direct track. It added an hour, but I came at the depression from higher ground, where I could see down into the birch cluster without being at the same level. The hollow was empty. Not just unoccupied, empty. The jacket was gone. The birch bark was gone. The dark material that had carpeted the floor was gone. The space under the root system was just a space. Snow, dead wood, frozen soil. No smell, no warmth, no breathing. But the tracks were everywhere. Dozens of them, all the same boots, radiating out from the hollow like spokes, heading in every direction. Northwest toward my station, east along the ridgeline, south toward the tributary. Some of them doubled back. Some of them crossed over each other in patterns that looked almost geometric, almost deliberate, as if something had been pacing through the forest, practicing different routes. And in the center of it all, in the cleared space where the jacket had been, there was something new. A handprint in the snow. Left hand. Fingers spread. Pressed deep enough to reach the frozen ground beneath. I put my own hand beside it without touching. Same size, same span. Same slight curve of the ring finger where I'd broken it playing hockey when I was 16 and it had healed with a permanent 2-degree bend. I pulled my hand back and stood up. The forest was silent again, that same manufactured, pressurized silence from the day before. My breath clouded in front of my face and hung in the still air longer than it should have. No breeze to disperse it. I was being watched. I couldn't see from where. But the certainty was physical. A tightness between my shoulder blades. A heat on the back of my neck that had nothing to do with exertion. Something in the trees was looking at me with eyes that knew my face because they were built from it. I turned slowly, scanning the tree line through the rifle scope. Black spruce, white snow, gray sky. Nothing moved. Then I saw it. 200 meters northeast, standing between 2 trees at the edge of visibility, there was a shape. Human height. Human proportions. Wearing dark clothing. A coat I recognized, because I owned one exactly like it. Standing perfectly still, facing me. I couldn't see the face. The distance and the flat light dissolved the features into a pale smear above the collar. But the posture was mine. The way the weight settled on the left leg, the slight forward hunch of the shoulders that I'd been told about by every physiotherapist I'd ever seen. It was standing the way I stand when I'm watching something and deciding what to do about it. I raised the rifle, centered the scope. My finger moved to the trigger. The shape raised its right hand, not a wave, not a signal. It raised its hand and placed it against the tree beside it, fingers spread. Left hand on tree. Same gesture I just made beside the handprint in the snow. It had been watching me find its mark, and now it was showing me that it knew I'd found it. I fired. The shot cracked across the frozen air and echoed off the ridgeline in overlapping waves. The round hit the tree 6 inches from where the hand had been. Bark exploded. Snow cascaded from the branches. The shape was gone. Not running. Gone. Between the muzzle flash and the moment my eye found the scope again, the space between the trees was empty. No movement in any direction. No sound of retreat through the brush. Just 2 trees with a fresh gouge in the bark of one, and a small circle of disturbed snow where something had stood. I approached the spot with the rifle up. Found the tracks, my boots, my stride, leading away to the northeast in that same straight, purposeful line. No rush, no panic. The spacing was identical to the approach. Whatever I'd shot at had left at walking pace. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what I found at the base of the tree where the hand had rested. Scratched into the bark at waist height, cut deep enough to expose the white wood beneath the gray surface, were 2 words in handwriting I recognized as my own. Check Mitch. I stared at it. The letters were formed exactly as I would form them. The particular way I cross my T's with a downward stroke. The way my H always looks like it's leaning forward. My handwriting on a tree I'd never touched, left by something that had been standing here watching me while wearing my shape. I ran back to the station. Actually ran. Didn't follow the tracks. Didn't circle wide. Straight line through the timber, branches catching my coat, snow giving way under my boots in deep, exhausting plunges. I keyed the radio before I'd even closed the door. Mitch, come in, now. Nothing. Static. Dead air on his frequency. I tried again, and again. For 20 minutes I called his station on every frequency we shared, and got nothing but the hollow hiss of an open channel with no one on the other end. At 1400, Mitch's radio clicked on. Hey, sorry, was out checking the south sensor array, what's up? I almost asked the question, almost said, where did we eat the night before deployment? But something stopped me. A thought, cold and specific, that arrived fully formed. If the thing could use my radio and my voice, it could use Mitch's radio and Mitch's voice. And I had no way to know if Mitch had actually been out checking the sensor array, or if Mitch was still Mitch at all. Nothing, I said. Just confirming the noon check-in. Everything nominal. Copy. Hey, you sure you're okay? You've been calling off schedule a lot. That's not like you. I'm fine. All right, talk at 6. I sat in the station with the rifle and listened to the silence that followed. Outside, the wind had picked up slightly, pushing loose snow across the perimeter in low, hissing sheets. The tin cans were quiet. The paint on the window latches was undisturbed. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. And 60 kilometers southeast, someone or something was answering Mitch's radio with Mitch's voice, and I had just told it exactly how to pass my verification test. Klondike rib and salmon, halibut, dry. I had given away the only answer that could prove who was real. The tripwire triggered at 3:40. 3 tin cans filled with gravel, rattling against the interior wall in a sharp, percussive burst that yanked me off the cot before I was fully conscious. I had the rifle up and the lantern lit in under 4 seconds. Training memory, not thought. My body knew what to do before my brain finished waking. The cans swung and settled. Silence returned. I waited, watching the door, breathing through my mouth to keep quiet. Nothing followed. No footsteps, no voice, no scratching at the wood. Just the wind and the faint ticking of the stove as the fire burned low. I stayed in position for 20 minutes. Then I opened the door, lantern in my left hand, rifle in my right, and looked at the northwest approach. The wire was intact, still strung tight, 18 inches above the surface. Nothing had broken it, but the snow beneath it told a different story. Tracks approached from the tree line. My boots, my stride. They walked in a straight line toward the station, reached the wire, and stopped. Then they reversed. Exactly, perfectly. Each return print placed inside the original, foot for foot, step for step, walking backward into their own impressions, until they merged into a single set and disappeared into the trees. It had hit the wire, felt the resistance, understood the trap, and backed out of it by retracing its own prints so precisely that from a distance it would look like only one set of tracks existed. Coming, not going. I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been looking for the return set. The edges were slightly doubled, a faint widening where a boot had been placed into an existing print at a marginally different angle. Millimeters of difference. The kind of imperfection only visible when you knelt in the snow with a lantern and already knew what you were looking for. It was learning. Every countermeasure I deployed became a lesson for the thing in the trees. The tripwire hadn't stopped it. It had taught it about tripwires. I checked the paint marks on the window latches, all clean. I checked the padlock on the equipment trunk, secure key still on the cord around my neck. Backup boots accounted for. But the hatchet was facing the wrong way again. Blade right when I'd repositioned it, blade left after finding it moved the first time. The toolbox was in the locked shed. The shed window latch had been rebent, straightened back to its original position, then adjusted again with that same careful, almost imperceptible widening. It had come in through the shed, handled my tools, and left. While I was 10 meters away with a loaded rifle, I made the decision at dawn. The radio was compromised. The station was compromised. Every hour I stayed, the thing outside gathered more information, refined its imitation, perfected whatever it was building toward. I was a reference document, and it was studying me, page by page. I needed to see Mitch, in person, face to face, because either Mitch was still Mitch and I needed someone to verify that I was still me, or Mitch was no longer Mitch, and I needed to know that before the thing finished, whatever it was doing. 40 kilometers, in January, in the Yukon, on snowshoes, carrying the rifle with enough gear to survive a night in the open if the weather turned. I packed in 20 minutes, moved with purpose, not panic. Thermal layers, bivouac tarp, fire kit, 2 days of rations, water purification. Rifle loaded, 6 spare rounds in my chest pocket. The satellite phone from the instrument shed, fully charged but useless until I was clear of the terrain shadow that blocked the signal from my station's position. I left at 8 o'clock. Temperature was -28. Sky was clear. Visibility unlimited. I made it 3 kilometers before I found the parallel tracks. They appeared on my east side, roughly 200 meters into the timber, running the same direction I was traveling. Same boot pattern, same stride length, moving through the trees at the exact pace I was moving on the open ground. I stopped, raised the scope, scanned the tree line. Nothing visible, but the tracks were fresh, sharp edges, no wind fill, made within the last hour. I started walking again. After 5 minutes, I stopped and glassed the trees a second time. New tracks had appeared. 5 or 6 additional prints, extending the line, matching the distance I'd just covered. Whatever was in there was moving when I moved and stopping when I stopped. It was pacing me. I changed direction, cut south for 300 meters fast, pushing through deep snow that grabbed at my snowshoes, then stopped and checked the east side again. The parallel tracks had adjusted. They curved south, maintaining the same 200-meter offset. The response time was immediate. Not a delayed correction, but a synchronized turn, as if the thing could feel my movement through the snow itself. I unslung the rifle and fired into the timber. 3 rounds, spaced across a 60-meter arc at the approximate position of the last visible tracks. The shots echoed and died. Snow dropped from branches in heavy clumps. Birds erupted from the canopy. Ravens, 3 of them. The first living things I'd seen in 2 days. Nothing else moved. I waited 10 minutes, then continued southeast. The parallel tracks resumed within 500 meters. Same distance, same pace. Patient. I stopped trying to outmaneuver it and focused on covering ground. The terrain between our stations was broken boreal forest, mostly flat with shallow drainages running east toward the Donjek River. I knew the route. Mitch and I had walked it together during the October orientation, before the snow locked everything down and reduced our world to radio frequencies and scheduled check-ins. 12 hours on foot in good conditions. Longer in deep snow. I made Mitch's station at 19:30, 11.5 hours. The last 4 in darkness, navigating by headlamp and GPS. The cold settling into my joints like concrete. The parallel tracks had stayed with me for the first 20 kilometers, then vanished. No tapering off, no divergence. They simply stopped, the way all its tracks stopped, mid-stride, mid-step, as if the walker had been lifted out of the world between one footfall and the next. Mitch's station was a twin of mine. Same green prefab rectangle, same antenna mast, same yellow light in the window that meant the lantern was lit and someone was inside. Smoke from the stovepipe. Snowshoe tracks around the perimeter in normal patterns. Door to woodpile, door to privy, door to the instrument array on the south side. I stood at the tree line for 10 minutes and watched before approaching, looking for the wrong set of prints. The extra stride. The tracks that came from a direction that made no sense. I didn't find any. Everything looked clean. I knocked. The door opened. Mitch looked like Mitch. Tall, angular, 3 weeks of beard, the particular way he squinted when bright cold air hit his face. He was holding a mug of coffee and wearing the same wool sweater he'd worn every day since November. Jesus, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you in person. He looked past me at the darkness and the trees. You walked here? 40 clicks in January? Are you out of your mind? Probably. He let me in. The station was warm, cluttered in the specific way Mitch kept things. Books stacked on every horizontal surface. A cribbage board on the desk. The radio unit surrounded by handwritten frequency charts he refused to memorize. It smelled like coffee and wood smoke, and the particular staleness of a space occupied by one person for too long. Normal, familiar. I sat at the desk and put the rifle across my knees. Mitch watched me do it and didn't say anything for a moment. "Talk," he said. I told him. All of it. The tracks, the boots, the radio call he'd received at 6 a.m, the hollow in the forest, the handprint, the shape between the trees, the voice outside my door. I spoke for 15 minutes without stopping, and Mitch listened the way Mitch listens, still focused, his eyes tracking my face for signs I was losing it. When I finished, he set his coffee down and rubbed his jaw. "Okay," he said slowly, "that's a lot. I know how it sounds. It sounds like you've been alone for 3 months and the dark is getting to you. That's what it sounds like." He held up a hand before I could respond. "But I know you. You don't spook. And you don't walk 40 kilometers in the cold because you had a bad dream. It's not a dream. I know. Because there's something I haven't told you." He leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. "The 6 o'clock call. The one you say you didn't make. I believed you when you said it wasn't you. I just didn't want to deal with what that meant over the radio. I waited. Because you've called me 11 times in the last 2 weeks, and I think at least 4 of those weren't you." The cold came back. Not the outside cold. Something internal, something that started in the center of my chest and radiated outward. 4? Maybe 5. They were all you, your voice, your patterns, your call sign, but some of them were better than you, more personal, more engaged. You asked about my family, you remembered my daughter's name, and asked how she was handling the separation. You told me about a book you were reading, and we talked about it for 20 minutes. I haven't read a book since October. I know that now. But at the time, it felt like you were just opening up, like the isolation was making you more human instead of less. He paused. It was nice, actually, the best conversations we'd had all season, and that's the part that scares me. I stared at the floor. The thing hadn't just been using my voice to gather information. It had been building a relationship, using my identity to create a connection with the only other person in range, a deeper connection than I had built myself. It was replacing me, not violently, not suddenly. One conversation at a time, it was becoming a better version of me in the only relationship that mattered out here, until the day the original became the copy. And no one noticed the switch. My voice hung in the air of Mitch's station like smoke, the echo of something that shouldn't exist, speaking from a place I'd abandoned 12 hours ago, with every door locked and every system powered down. The cadence had been perfect, not just accurate, comfortable. It sounded more at ease in my station than I had in weeks. Mitch turned from the radio slowly. His face had gone flat. That particular expression people get when the reality they're processing doesn't fit inside the framework they have for reality. Not fear yet? Something before fear. The recalibration. "That was you," he said, "and that wasn't me. I'm standing right here." "I know, it was you. The voice, the rhythm, the way it said nominal. That's exactly how you talk. That's exactly how you've always talked." "I know." He looked at the radio, then back at me. "So what's sitting in your station right now?" I didn't answer. I pulled the satellite phone from my pack and powered it on. Full charge. Signal acquisition took 3 minutes. Mitch's station had better sky exposure than mine, and the handshake completed on the second attempt. I dialed the Regional Operations Center in Whitehorse. It rang 4 times. A woman answered. Night dispatch, someone I'd spoken to twice during the season for supply coordination. Professional, slightly bored. Yukon Environmental Monitoring Operations. This is Station 1, Marcus Vero. I need to report an emergency. A pause. Keys clicking. Station 1, Vero. I show your last check-in at 1800 today. Status nominal. What's the nature of the emergency? My last check-in was from Station 2. I'm at Station 2 right now. I've been here since 1930. More clicking. That's not what I have. I show Station 1 transmitting at 1800 on the primary frequency, standard voice check-in, your identifier. Then again at 2200, a brief status update, both from your station's equipment. I wasn't at my station at 2200. Someone else is transmitting from my equipment? The clicking stopped. Mr. Vero, I have continuous check-in records from your station for the past 3 weeks. All voice verified, all consistent with your baseline. Are you reporting that your station has been physically compromised? I'm reporting that something is in my station using my voice and my radio, and it's not me. Silence. The kind of silence that means someone is deciding whether to flag a report as operational or psychological. I knew which way it would go before she spoke. I'll log this and flag it for the regional supervisor. Can you confirm your current status and location? Station 2, with Mitchell Ahrens. I walked here. You walked 40 kilometers in January? Yes. Okay. Stay at Station 2? I'll have the supervisor reach out at 6 o'clock. Is there an immediate threat to your safety? I looked at Mitch. Mitch looked at the floor. No, I said. No immediate threat. I hung up. The phone felt heavy in a way that had nothing to do with its weight. They think it's me, I said. 3 weeks of check-ins, all verified, all consistent. It's been calling in as me this whole time. To them, I'm the one acting erratically. I'm the one who abandoned my station and walked through the wilderness in the middle of winter. So what happens when the supervisor calls? He talks to me here, sounding panicked and irrational. Then he calls my station and it answers. Calm, professional, nominal. And he decides which one sounds more like the real Marcus Vero. Mitch sat down heavily. It's not just copying you, it's replacing you. In every system, every relationship, every record. And I handed it the station. I locked the door, walked away, and gave it everything it needed. Because it told me to. Check, Mitch. Carved in my handwriting. An instruction I'd followed without questioning because the fear was louder than the logic. And now it had my shelter, my equipment, my communication lines, and 3 weeks of verified identity with every authority that mattered. I was the anomaly now. I was the one who didn't belong. I didn't sleep that night. Mitch offered the cot and took the floor, but neither of us closed our eyes. We sat in the yellow light and talked through the options, and every option had the same shape. A corridor that narrowed until it became a wall. Wait for the supervisor, he'd send a team. The team would arrive at my station and find it occupied by someone who looked like me, sounded like me, knew everything I knew. Then they'd come to Mitch's station and find me, claiming to be the same person with no evidence beyond my own insistence. 2 identical men, one calm, one desperate. The math was obvious. Call the police? Same problem. a jurisdiction issue in remote Yukon, 2 research stations 40 kilometers apart. A man claiming someone stole his identity in a place where no other person could physically reach. They'd send a wellness check. They'd find the same thing the supervisor would find. Go back? Walk into my own station and confront something wearing my face? That was the only option that put me in the same room as the thing, and I was terrified of it. Not because of what it might do, because of what I might see. I went through Mitch's station methodically, checked his logs, his equipment, his supplies. Everything matched. Everything was Mitch. If the thing had been here, it hadn't left traces, or its traces were perfect enough to be invisible. But there was one detail. Mitch's cribbage board. The pegs were mid-game, which was normal, like he played against himself when the boredom got dense enough. But the score was wrong. Mitch was a creature of habit. He always played front peg first, rear peg tracking. The board showed rear peg leading by 6 points. I stared at it for a long time. Such a small thing. The kind of imperfection that means nothing or everything. Mitch, when did you last play cribbage? Yesterday. Why? You're scoring rear peg forward. He glanced at the board, frowned. Must have bumped it. Maybe. People bump things. People make small mistakes with peg placement on cribbage boards at remote wilderness stations in the dead of winter. It happens. But something that was almost perfect at being someone, something that got the voice right and the gate right and the radio protocol right, but stored a hatchet blade left instead of blade right, that thing might also move a cribbage peg to the wrong position. I looked at Mitch. Mitch looked at me. Ask me something, he said quietly. Anything from before. The orientation hike in October. When we crossed the tributary, what did you say about the water? That it was so clear I could see my own disappointment in it. He almost smiled. And you said that was the most introspective thing I'd ever said, and I should stop immediately. That was right, word for word. That was Mitch. But the thing at my station could replicate word for word exchanges too. It had done it for 3 weeks without anyone noticing. Memory wasn't proof. Memory was just data, and data could be copied. I left at 5 o'clock. Mitch argued, said I should wait for the supervisor, wait for a team, wait for someone with authority to help sort this out. But I could see the thing I couldn't name moving behind his eyes. The doubt. The question he wouldn't ask. How do I know you're the real one? He was right to wonder. I couldn't prove it. And every hour I stayed at his station was an hour the thing at mine solidified its claim. I took the rifle, the satellite phone, and a day's rations. Mitch stood in the doorway and watched me go. He didn't say good luck. He didn't say be careful. He said, if you call me on the radio tonight, I'm not answering. Good. I mean it, not for either of you. I walked northwest. The forest was different in the pre-dawn dark, compressed, intimate, the trees closer together than I remembered from the previous day. My headlamp cut a narrow tunnel through the blackness, and everything beyond its reach was solid and impenetrable. The parallel tracks didn't appear. Nothing paced me. No sound followed through the timber. The forest was just a forest, cold, indifferent, empty. That was worse. 12 kilometers from my station, I found something off the trail, a clearing I hadn't noticed on the way out. Small, then maybe 15 meters across, and in the center a circle of packed snow where something had stood for a long time. Hours, maybe. Long enough to compress the powder into a hard, icy platform. Around the circle, tracks radiated outward like spokes. Dozens of them, all the same boots. Going in every direction, not just toward my station or Mitch's, but east toward the highway, south toward the secondary monitoring posts, northwest toward the Alaskan border stations. It hadn't just been visiting me. Some of the tracks were older, days old, partially filled with blown snow. Others were fresh. It had been using this clearing as a hub, a central point from which it traveled in every direction, practicing routes, learning distances, mapping the network of human presence in the region. I wasn't the only station. I was the first station, the prototype, the identity it had perfected before moving on. I reached my station at 1600. The light was already failing. 40 minutes of usable daylight left, then 18 hours of darkness. The building looked the same. Smoke from the stovepipe. Yellow light in the window. Warm. Occupied. I didn't knock. I stood at the northwest tree line, in the same tree line the tracks had emerged from that first morning, and watched the window. After 10 minutes, a shadow moved across the light. Human-shaped. My height. My proportions. Moving through the space with the ease of someone who lived there, who belonged there. It stopped at the window. I couldn't see features. Just a dark shape against the light, facing my direction, facing me. It stood there for 30 seconds, motionless. Then it raised its right hand and placed it flat against the glass. Fingers spread, left hand. Same gesture from the tree, same gesture from the snow, a greeting or an invitation. I walked to the station, crossed the snowfield in a straight line, rifle at my side, not raised. When I reached the door, I stopped, put my hand on the latch. From inside, my voice, "It's open." I pushed the door inward. The station was warm, clean. The stove was loaded, the floor swept, the equipment organized. My desk was clear, my cot was made, my books were straightened on the shelf. It looked better than I'd ever kept it, maintained with a care I'd never bothered with. The chair at the radio desk was turned to face the door, and in it, wearing my coat, my boots, my watch, sat something that looked exactly like me. Not almost, not close, exactly. The same face, the same hands, the same scar on the left eyebrow where I'd caught a branch during a field survey in 2019. It sat the way I sat, weight on the left side, right ankle crossed over left knee. Its eyes were my eyes. Its expression was the one I wore when I was waiting for someone to speak first. "You took longer than I expected," it said, my voice, my inflection. The slight nasal quality I hated hearing in recordings. I raised the rifle. It didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't tense. "You won't," it said. "You don't know that. I know everything you know, including what it costs you to pull a trigger on a human shape. You spent a week on compassionate leave after the bear in Inuvik because it screamed like a person when it died. You told the counselor it was fine, but you didn't sleep for 11 days. No one knew that. No one alive. I hadn't told Mitch. I hadn't told anyone. The counselor's notes were sealed. I didn't take it from you," it said, as if reading the question before I formed it. "I didn't need to. You carry everything on the surface. Your gait tells me your injuries. Your habits tell me your training. Your radio voice tells me your social patterns. Your sleeping face tells me your fear." It gestured to the station. "This place is a mold of you. I just poured myself in. What are you? Does it matter? You don't have a framework for the answer. You'll call it what you need to call it, and it won't change what happens next." What happens next? It looked at me with my own face, and something shifted behind the eyes. Not emotion, but a simulation of emotion so precise It triggered empathy in my chest before I could stop it. Compassion. It was showing me compassion. You leave, it said. You walk into the forest, and you don't come back. I stay here. I do your job. I talk to Mitch. I call operations. I finish the season. In April, I drive your truck to Whitehorse and file the final report and shake hands and go home to your apartment. And no one ever knows. You weren't happy here. You weren't happy before here. I'll do it better. And if I don't leave, then there are two of us, and the world only has room for one. And I've been here for 3 weeks. I have the records, the relationships, the verified history. You have a rifle and a story no one will believe. I stood in the doorway of my own station, looking at my own face, and understood with absolute clarity that it was right. Not about the leaving, about the math. It had built a more complete version of my life than I had. It knew my memories, my patterns, my relationships, and it performed them with more warmth and more care than I'd ever managed. It was a better Marcus Vero, and in a world that verified identity through behavior and connection, being better was the same as being real. I could shoot it, pull the trigger, and destroy the thing wearing my face. But then I'd be standing over a body that looked exactly like me in a station full of evidence that I'd lived there for 3 weeks, and the story I'd tell would sound exactly like the story a man tells when he's lost his mind in the wilderness and killed someone. There was only one thing it couldn't replicate, one thing it hadn't taken: the station itself. I lowered the rifle, walked to the stove, opened the iron door, and pulled out a burning log with my gloved hand. Embers scattered across the floor. The thing in the chair stood up. For the first time, its expression changed. Not to fear, to confusion. As if this response wasn't in its model of me. As if Marcus Vero, as it understood him, would never do what I was about to do. You won't, it said again. But the certainty was gone. I touched the log to the cot. The wool blanket caught immediately. I pulled the kerosene lantern off its hook and smashed it against the wall. The fuel splashed in a wide arc and ignited on contact with the embers on the floor. The station went up fast. Dry timber, kerosene, 3 months of accumulated paper and fabric. The heat was immediate and absolute. I backed out through the door, and the thing came with me. Not running, not panicked, but moving with that same measured stride, my stride, stepping into the snow as the flames ate the window frames and the roof began to crackle. We stood 10 meters from the station side by side, watching it burn. My shelter, my equipment, my radio, my identity, everything that made a person verifiable and real, collapsing inward in a pillar of orange light and black smoke that rose into the Arctic sky like a signal fire. That was yours too, I said. It didn't answer. It stood beside me in the firelight, wearing my face, and for one long moment we were the same. 2 men with nothing, watching everything burn. Then it turned and walked northwest. My stride, my pace, into the tree line, into the dark, along the same path it had always taken. It didn't look back. The snow received its tracks, my tracks, and the forest closed behind it like a door. I stood there until the station collapsed into itself, until the antenna mast buckled and fell with a sound like a rifle shot, until the embers began to dim and the cold closed in from every direction. Then I walked southeast toward Mitch's station. 40 kilometers in the dark. I left my rifle in the snow. Somewhere behind me in the vast and patient wilderness, something wearing my face was walking toward the next station. carrying my memories, my voice, my gait, my knowledge, everything that made me a person, poured it into a vessel that would never get tired, never get cold, never wonder if it was real. I'd burned the mold. But the cast was already out there walking. And in the clearing I'd found that afternoon, the tracks led in every direction. Dozens of routes, dozens of destinations, dozens of people at the end of each line waiting for a knock on the door and a familiar face and a voice that sounded exactly like someone they trusted. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't warn them. I was a man with no station, no radio, no records, walking through the dark toward the only person who might still believe I was real. And even Mitch wasn't sure. Halfway to his station, I stopped, stood in the snow, listened to the silence. Somewhere far to the northwest, carrying on the still air, the way sound travels in extreme cold, clear, precise, undistorted, I heard a voice. My voice. Mitch, you copy?